everyone to Grid Live Wrap Up. NASCAR Cup Series, Chicago Street Race, domination by one driver again. Alex Palou, the OpenAI car, issues at the end, didn't get the job done. Scott Dixon, near machine like, gets the win. And Formula One, McLaren 1-2, but Nico Hulkenberg stealing the spotlight in third place. We have Tanner Smith from the Pitbox Press, editor at pitboxpress.com, and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in us through Patreon, link in the video description. Plus, you could do buy me a coffee, YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air, or we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And of course, across social media at Grid Network TV and gridnetworktv.com. Matthew Bro working hard with the Chicago race recap for our website. We encourage everyone share your questions, opinions about the races this race weekend. A lot of talk about Tanner when it comes to the Cup Series. You mentioned it. It felt like we were talking about the SVG pre-race show. Well, this might be the SVG post-race show, you could call it. SVG just unmatched at Chicago, and we saw right before we went on the air, Bob Pockris tweeted that the official results tech completed. Shane Van Gisbergen is officially your winner. Just absolutely unmatched at Chicago. Now has 2 wins here at this track. Second win of the year. Second win in 4 races. Granted, we've had 2 road course races, then 2 ovals. But when it comes to the playoff grid, this is where it gets really interesting. 2 wins, 4th ranked, and we now have Sonoma the next race weekend for the Cup Series. SVG, he could tie Hamlin, Larson, Bell with 3 wins. He won here in the Xfinity Series last year. Big battle with Austin Hill in the Xfinity Series. With the 2 wins, and I almost feel like he is not distracted by this bracket challenge, where we'll get into later on. Is SVG and that 88 team peaking at the right moment?
I would say they're peaking at an appropriate moment. I think we all kind of assumed when the 88 team got called up for a full-time opportunity in the Cup Series that once the road course stretch started to hit the schedule is when we'd start to see SVG start to roll into victory lane, and it turns out that's exactly what's happened. I do think that some, including myself, thought that he would have a stronger run at COTA and probably come away with that victory, but it just didn't end up panning out that way because he just didn't quite have restarts down just yet. With all that said, I feel like until I see them get a top 10 on an oval, I'm really not going to take them seriously as a playoff threat. I hope that doesn't disappoint too many people, but that's just the fact of the matter. You have a guy that is really good at one style of track, and when we go to the normal style of racetrack that we go to, he's just not present. He's somewhere mired back below 20th place more often than not. And that's not a dig at him. He's still learning these things. As I mentioned in our pre-race show earlier, Daniel Suarez mentioned that he didn't start oval racing until he was 17. And because of that, he feels like he's behind some of the younger drivers like Connor Zilic, for instance, who has, had a little bit more time to get his feet wet in oval racing and things like that. So while it is a good thing that SVG and that 88 team in their first season together, and again, that really can't be, swept away behind all of this. This is a team that was essentially the 71 team at Spire Motorsports last year that fielded the Zane Smith entry. But with their first year alongside SVG, you've got to be really, really excited about the results that they've put up if you're Trackhouse Racing. But at the same time, the reality is that they are still around like 30th in points because at the ovals, they just aren't as strong. So until I start seeing some major strides in oval results and performance, I'm really just not going to take this team seriously as like a legitimate like playoff threat. So while today is good and next week probably will be as well for the 88 team, I wouldn't take it as a sign of like this team starting to, hit its stride as far as becoming a weekly contender. They're still really strong at one style of track and not too great really everywhere else.
I would agree with just about all your points there. When it comes to the road courses, this is what SVG was hired to do: go out there and get the wins. What I do feel is a big improvement. Coda, that could have easily been an SVG win. It just didn't work out, and just seemed like that car, SVG, just did not have something prevented them from getting way back up to the front to get that win. And considering that was a brand new Coda layout, I came in, especially Mexico City, thinking, okay, SVG might be the favorite, but let's see what happens at Chicago. Can he really be the dominant force? Well, he looked like it. Now I'm really curious to see what's going to happen at Sonoma. Will they be that dominant, or now that we're coming to Sonoma, a track with many years on the Cup Series circuit, a lot of drivers have this experience, and he is going to be first time. I'm really curious to see how that's going to shape up for SVG, the 88 team. I think they're going to feel pretty good about it. I'm convinced they could put down a good race. It's just a matter of controlling the situation, especially when they're hidden, get the track position while others stay out for the stage breaks. Those are, I think, some of the issues that are out of their control. But if they put together a good race and they're feeling pretty good, that would be something else if they were to get that third win next Sunday at Sonoma and be essentially tied with the top runners in wins. That would be something else. And this is, of course, the third year we've had the Chicago Street Course. He's just on another level, SVG. And, of course, he won the Xfinity Series race. I know Ben and Brandon will be talking a lot about that. And we had Will Brown in the field today. And Will Brown, just unfortunate, 2 laps into the race, and he's done because he got collected into Carson Hocevar's crash. Finished 39th, and because Hocevar, just one of those big deals where it just seems like a tough break, hitting the inside wall and taking out several cars with him. Including Will Brown made the trip all the way out here, 2 laps, done for. And of course, he's the defending Supercar Series champion where SVG came from. And when you look at past riders like Brody Kosecki, another Supercar Series champion, came to the Cup Series, 22nd at the Indianapolis Road Course in 2023. Cam Waters, 35th in Sonoma last year with RFK in his debut. Not to mention, when you look at SVG compared to everyone else, he is our 2022 grid ranking world champion. He's done World Rally even, scored points there. Is this just a reminder on how SVG is just on another level when it comes to these road courses series and cup cars, or even when you look at what they have in the supercars and road course racing?
Yes and no. I do think that if we contextualize his 3 Cup Series victories, I think that makes the story a little bit more clear on what SVG is good at compared to everybody else. Obviously, his 2 wins on the streets in Chicago, that's, again, the very first race of its kind in the NASCAR Cup Series, at least since Watkins Glen was still, pretty much a road circuit way, way, way back in the day. Same with Road America back in the 50s. But in the modern era, we hadn't had a street course race since, all the way back before the Vietnam War. And because of that, literally none of the drivers, or in some cases, any of their fathers or grandfathers, had raced on a street circuit in a stock car. So with that in mind, you have a guy that obviously was an exceptional talent in his own racing series in Australia. He absolutely blitzed people on the street circuits there, because in supercars you have to push it to the limit. You have to eke out every little inch, every little centimeter, I guess, to be a little bit more regionally specific. You have to eke out every little millimeter possible to the wall to get that extra tenth or two of time. And when you're used to that kind of racing, I do think that with that in mind, you get a guy that's just going to have an inherent advantage. And then you look at Mexico, where that was our first race there in the Cup Series with this car. So it doesn't really surprise me that he was able to win. I think the real test is going to be how SVG fares on the Sonoma road course and the Watkins Glen road course. Obviously, Watkins Glen last year, he had an exceptional chance to win, and unfortunately did what Carson Hocevar did today, clipped the inside of a barrier, and it took him offline on the final lap, and he bottled it. Sonoma, obviously, we haven't seen him race there in a Cup car, but he has done some tire testing, so in theory, he should be in a good spot to contend there. But at the same time, we don't really know. It's a true unknown. I do feel like, based on what we know of SVG, based on what we know of Trackhouse, considering they have a win there back in 22 with the 99 team and Daniel Suarez, I do think that you'll see the 88 team show a lot of strength next week, but I'm just really curious if it's going to, kind of carry on, because at COTA, he still kind of looked above average for sure, but on restarts and just making passes, he just couldn't do it, which kind of surprised me, considering he was one of the only drivers in the field to have experience on a layout similar to that at COTA. So, yeah, I think that when SVG wins like a standard track that some of these drivers have been to 10, 15 times and beats the field that way, I feel like it'll be a better representation to support the point that you're trying to make with the question, Joe. But at this point, I can't really agree with it based on the contextual evidence we have.
I feel like you said, Sonoma and Watkins Glen, that's really where he's going to have to show, okay, he is on that other level, because Mexico City, brand new. Chicago, while this is our third year, is just such a different animal. I feel it's just hard for everyone to really get a hold of. And just SVG, you sometimes have a driver that just, with a certain track, they're just unstoppable. I know we talked about, like, in the past, Harvick, Phoenix, unstoppable. I'll throw in there Iowa, Joseph Newgarden, unstoppable so far. SVG, Chicago, that just looks unstoppable. And in fact, in the chat room, Denver say they should rename the Chicago Street Course Autodrome Van Gisbergen. I mean, really, he had last year under control until Chase Briscoe took him out. And then this is why SVG is a living legend in supercars, and the Cup field is now needing to change their game, because SVG is toying with them in front or behind.
I think that's a bit of a robust take. Again, to harken back to that Daniel Suarez interview he had on the Dale Jr. Download, he kind of alluded to the fact that when you're transitioning from strictly road course racing to oval racing, you kind of have to reorient how you do things inside the car, which I'm sure SVG has been struggling with on the ovals, to kind of flip everything. So if the entire Cup Series field needs to completely re-engineer how they drive based on how one guy does it, then SVG needs to re-engineer how he drives at the ovals to get better just like them. You see how it's kind of a catch-22? Like, it's not one of those things to me that's like really black and white. Like, yes, he does a certain thing with his feet in the car and with the three pedals on the ground that do make a bit of a difference. But at the same time, I feel like, honestly, the crew chiefs need to do a little bit better of a job and put their drivers in better positions. I mean, today, at most, SVG's strongest contender was Ty Gibbs, who was hardly ever up front for much of the day and had worse tires towards the end of the race. So it wasn't even really a fair fight. And I don't really think, based on what we've seen thus far out of Shane Van Gisbergen in the NASCAR Cup Series, you're going to beat him with a fair fight. You have to have a tire advantage. You have to beat him through strategy. You have to hope he makes a mistake, which is very, very rare. As we saw at Watkins Glen last year, it was probably the only mistake on a road course he really made all season outside of plowing into Austin Hill's bumper at Coda in the Xfinity Series. So while I do agree to some extent that the drivers definitely have to improve on the road courses to try to keep up with the guy, they've had his data for 2 years and can't do it. Like it's at this point, it's just something he does different and does better than everybody else that they simply can't adapt to because of years of muscle memory. So yeah, to me, it's easy for us who are outside the race car to say things like that, like, oh, the rest of the field needs to catch up to him. But it's easier said than done, I guess, is ultimately my point.
Very much easier said than done. Just go pass him. That's all you need to do.
If they wanted to win, they shouldn't have let him by.
Don't let him pass you. That's the other best tip. I know for Ty Gibbs, that's all he had to do was just try to get around him, but couldn't get it done. And once again, another road course, another unique situation, not exactly like the first time, like with Mexico City, but again, in this road course, Ty Gibbs, second place, led a Toyota 3-4 effort with Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin. And we all know what happened to Ty Gibbs in Mexico City. The timing of that caution really took him out. He seemed like he was the only other person that could hang in there with Shane Van Gisbergen. Denny Hamlin, smart race today. Tyler Reddick, those fresh tires at the end, he was coming strong, but I know we talked about right before the show, had he got around Ty Gibbs, we just don't think he had the laps to get to SVG. Now that we're coming to another road course, we've seen Ty Gibbs have this back-to-back good road course efforts. Do you feel Ty Gibbs is sort of the lead Toyota driver when it comes to road courses in 2025?
Let me ask you this, Joe. Has he won this year?
Not yet, but when it looks at the road courses.
But has a Toyota driver won on a road course this year?
Not that I can think.
Christopher Bell.
Bell.
Christopher Bell won a Coda.
Yep.
I think it's a little too early to say that. Kind of hearkening back to what I said earlier about SVG having won at strictly new racetracks or racetracks that are completely different from what all of NASCAR competitors have ever run on in the past, or a just completely new circuit in the case of Mexico. You have to apply those same qualifiers to Ty Gibbs's performances. Yes, it was great that he was super competitive at Mexico, but again, it was a very first attempt at that race for everybody practically in the field. I'm sure whatever lessons Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch learned from racing there 20 years ago probably didn't transfer over. In fact, Denny Hamlin didn't even show up to that race because he was attending to the birth of his child. So I just feel like it's a little early to be saying that. I want to see how well Ty Gibbs performs at Sonoma in particular because, again, you kind of have to start performing at these courses where drivers have a bit more of an experience gap over you and a knowledge gap. And I haven't really seen Ty Gibbs do that. In fact, at Mexico, he still had a fast car and he completely fell off the last 20 laps of the race because he burnt his tires up. So I still feel like Ty Gibbs, while he does show a lot of pace at times, there is still a lot of room for him to improve, especially in racecraft. I feel like it would have been nice to have seen him even like try to keep up with SVG and try to compete. I thought it was impressive that he was able to keep Reddick behind him for like the last lap and a half of what we got because there was a whole 9/10 of a lap that we just didn't end up having for a reason we'll talk about later. But at the same time, I feel like while Gibbs has shown a lot of strength, I think it's a little too early and a little too recency bias to say that he is the best Toyota driver on road courses when Reddick has, I believe, 2 top 5 finishes now at Coda and here. And yeah, granted, he was completely MIA when you refer to Mexico, but at COTA, Ty Gibbs was MIA. So, as much as I would like to say that Ty Gibbs is certainly headed in the right direction, I need to see it more on some ovals as well. Obviously, he had that strong run at Michigan, and that was really nice to see. But again, his good runs are so few and far between, or have a couple of qualifiers attached to him, like went to this track for the first time. This is a unique style of circuit. I need to see him start to put in some of these performances at places like Dover and Indianapolis, where some of these drivers have him beat in terms of experience and knowledge. I need to see that pace and racecraft really take the next step before I really believe he's going to win a race this year.
It's going to be very interesting to see how Ty Gibbs can handle everything at Sonoma next race weekend. Now, one of the big things, of course, when it comes to the NASCAR Cup Series, it just seems it comes down to trying to get each and every position. It matters every single point, every single race. And now you throw in there this bracket challenge. Second race for it, Bubba Wallace finished 28th after contact with Alex Bowman fighting for position. Bowman went on to finish 8th and eliminate Bubba Wallace from the bracket challenge. The two of them paired against each other. I overall felt like this was just a little too aggressive for the time of the race for the two of them, because now Bubba, 2 points in the good in the NASCAR playoffs when it comes to the standings. Not a good day considering what he lost. Alex Bowman, of course, he is still in there, but do you believe Bubba Wallace lost sight of the big picture? And was this a mistake or just part of hard racing between the two, and they just so happened to be against each other in the bracket challenge?
I think the bracket challenge had an element in this. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the drivers that are still in it still want to get that $1 million payout. With that said, I do think that in the back of Bubba's mind, he hadn't really gotten Bowman back at any point for what happened here last year, where Bowman completely cleaned him out on the stage 2 restart and practically into Bubba's day, en route to Bowman's victory. So, and then there was the post-race small fireworks, sparklers, I guess you would say, where Wallace nudges Bowman into the wall, and for some reason that was a $50,000 fine, which I thought was gratuitous and completely ridiculous. But with all that aside, I think this was just hard racing. I felt like Alex Bowman's onboard was pretty conclusive. It looked like coming out of turn 2, Bubba tried to clear himself off of Bowman's nose and cleared himself into the wall and then spun himself around. As someone who has been a pretty fierce, defender of Bubba Wallace, I was like, buddy, you kind of wrecked yourself there. And I think after the race, if you watched his interactions with Bowman, it seemed like he pretty much agreed with that assessment. But at the same time, yeah, one could say that, it's a shame that he, took himself out. And I think it's going to affect his playoff chances. I feel like with the rate people are winning at right now, the cut line's only going to continue to shrink. So I don't think getting in on points is a guarantee regardless. While it would have been nice to have had, Bubba was on 15 lap worse tires than practically everybody behind him. So him spinning himself out and ending his race early was probably just delaying the inevitable, to be honest with you. But I think that he could have come away with maybe a 13th place finish at best, had he not gotten beaten around by the rest of the guys with fresh tires. I just feel like he was in a really bad spot and kept trying to overcompensate for it. And he kind of pushed Bowman around a little bit, and I thought that was fair, but Bowman not giving him an inch after being shoved around was also fair. So I consider that a draw between them two. I was honestly surprised Bowman got away as good as he did, considering how much damage he sustained in the multiple clashes with Bubba, as well as his additional clash with the one car kind of in that same sequence. And you really got to tip your cap to Bowman for being able to finish that race off on those fresher tires and get a really solid finish after it looked pretty bleak there for a minute, and especially him starting in the back today. So as far as my verdict on this situation, I think it's Bubba's fault, like 95%. Like I said, I think Bowman probably could have given him some room, maybe, but it was also like 8 laps to go. You're not going to give a guy room that's been beating your door off. So it's unfortunate for the 23 team, but they seem pretty confident that they'll regroup and keep going. I actually really appreciated that Bubba didn't go over there all like steaming mad at Bowman. He chalked it up to hard racing just like I just did. And honestly, it was kind of refreshing. Like, I feel like something that's held Bubba back has been like his ability to not like move past things. I feel like him allowing this to just slide right off of his shoulder is only going to help him going into next week at Sonoma, where he has had a couple of strong runs before, and he could be a really good candidate to get some stage points that could help bolster his playoff hopes.
Get some stage points, help him out when it comes to the playoffs. I agree when it comes to seeing the two of them talk and hard racing with 8 laps to go. I mean, this is a street race. We saw it got very physical restarts, the racing. I know at one point it seemed like Bowman did express some frustration with how Bubba Wallace was racing, but I feel like a lot of drivers were racing that way, sort of squeezing people towards the wall, because concrete walls all around the track, no room for error in a street course. So overall, I feel like we saw a lot of beating and banging, and just nice to have a race where we did not have weather become a part of the race.
Almost did.
It almost did. Almost, but for the most part, it didn't. One person that was not a factor at all today, William Byron. He finished this race in last place. Yesterday crashed, disastrous day. Issues today, considering they worked all night on that car, he didn't complete really much of a lap. Clutch issues, they worked on that all night, and the clutch is not going. And here's something very interesting, considering a lot of talk very early on in the season was how consistent that team was. Last 5 races, 4 finishes outside the top 25. The one exception, Mexico City, 9th place finish, but nothing lately. And when you look at the season overall with only 1 win, that was the Daytona 500, where right place, right time when the leaders crashed and he inherited the lead. Is this team in trouble? Because without that Daytona 500 last lap crash, alternatively, he could be winless right now.
If Denny Hamlin clipped his left rear and not Tyler Reddick's, we could be having a whole different discussion right now about the point leader not having a win this year. And coming into Chicago, where he looked to be fastest in his group in practice and then completely ate it coming out of turn 10 and pretty much ended his whole weekend. Didn't even get to qualify. Came into this race, the car didn't really have power. I believe there was some form of a clutch issue that they sustained in rebuilding the car. It leaves you scratching your head. Like, the 9 car had to go to the back for damage sustained in qualifying and practice, and he mostly turned out fine. Obviously, I don't know what happened to Chase Elliott today. I think he got a piece of something, but I don't know what. It might have been on a restart and we just never got the replay. TNT's coverage was okay at best today, and I won't get in too deep into that. So let's focus back on the 24 team. I feel like this team, every time we hit the summer, completely falls apart. I don't know what it is. They are, in my opinion, the 24 team of the current day. They are what people have turned Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canales' like caricature of their title run, where people always claimed that they sandbagged all year long and didn't contend. and weren't that good until the last 10 races of the season, which I have a lovely article on pitboxpress.com that completely flushes that stupid narrative down the drain. But if you take all of that caricaturing, all of that entire characterization of Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus of sandbagging in the regular season, and you bring that to now, what does that sound like? It sounds like the 24 team. They come in, they win one race, maybe two in the regular season, and then they completely fall off a cliff. It happens every year in the summer, and I am starting to wonder, like, is the Rudy Fugle and William Byron partnership something that can be a long-lasting and beneficial relationship, such as the Jimmy Johnson-Chad Knaus relationship, or is it closer to something where we have a driver that needed this boost by bringing in an old crew chief that kind of helped bring them back to relevance? I mean, you look at Byron's first 3 years, he had, I want to say, Darian Grubb his rookie year, and that was not great. That's no offense to Darian Grubb. Then he had Chad Knaus and kind of middling performed for 2 years while he was still getting his sea legs under him, so to speak. And since then, he's had Rudy Fugle, and they found a lot of success together. They've made 2 championship 4 runs at this point, but you've got to wonder if they're starting to hit a cap, like if they're starting to hit their ceiling as far as like what they can do and accomplish together, because they do this every summer. It's genuinely mind-boggling. Like, the only one I can think of where it didn't exactly happen that way is 2023, and even then, the only win that they got in the summer was because it started to rain at Atlanta while they happened to have the lead. So yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit worried for the 24 team and their playoff hopes. I could see if this team doesn't start to right the ship, that, I mean, heck, could they fall out of the first round of the playoffs? I mean, we didn't think it would happen to Brad Keselowski or Martin Truex Jr. last year, and it did. So I am a little bit concerned for the 24 team, and if they come into next weekend and have a similarly blah or completely non-existent race like today, you've really got to start sounding the alarms, raising the DEFCON up from 5 up closer to 1.
It's something where this team just seems to be really on a slide. And I think when they first brought in Rudy Fugle, I had the same thought as you mentioned. Is this just something to help William Byron build his confidence up? Well, now he is a driver where a lot of people anticipate to be on your short list for wins week in and week out. Maybe they are starting to plateau. Maybe they're just getting to that point where it's like, okay, I think of sort of the situation with Tony Eury Jr. and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Gerald Jr. wanted him as a crew chief, but it just seemed like they just could not get to that next level, missing something. I'm starting to wonder if maybe that's the case here, and where will they go? Because this slide, it's something else. When 4 out of the 5 races outside the top 25 finishes, not good at all. In the chat room, Denver says, Hendrick Motorsports is not a summer organization. Tanner, when it comes to Hendrick Motorsports, do you feel in the summertime that's just sort of like a weak spot for them? Because really, it's the playoffs that seems to matter the most.
I think this just leans into that caricature of Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson that I mentioned earlier. So I chalk this up as a conspiracy, and I'm going to move on.
I feel like when it comes to NASCARs, especially, momentum is always such a big key for such a big season. If you get it at the end, hey, I mean, look what SVG's doing. If he could get out of that first round of the playoffs, second round, get the Roval, all of a sudden, you got 2 drivers that we thought would not be in that round 8 spot potentially gone. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. One development we've been following and is being discussed online is that last caution. This race ended under yellow. Shane Van Gisbergen took the white flag. Then we had the caution come out. Cody Ware in the number 51, the Arby's car. Arby's had a huge presence at the track. a big serious crash. He was coming down the long straightaway, the brake rotor blew, and he went into the tire wall pretty quickly. Jeff Gluck from The Athletic reported that it took 35 seconds, 34.7 to be exact, but nearly 35 seconds to get the caution out. Now, of course, had that caution come out much quicker, we'd probably be talking about overtime. You had the rain, the fog coming. I mean, victory lane was moved indoors. But as such a hard hit, Gluck did report that Cody was heard on the radio say needed help after the crash. How tough of a spot is this for NASCAR when you have situations like this? Because it essentially alters the race ending.
It's only a tough spot because of how their rule book is currently constructed. They knew the threat of rain was coming, and I think that's why they held the caution, but they are attempting to engineer something else as to why they didn't do it. And their excuses are that they were negligent, which is a terrible excuse. You have access to every car's data. You have access to all the camera angles that are available to you. They knew Cody Ware was in that tire wall for practically the entire time he was there. And they were hoping somehow that after he blew a brake rotor and shot it out into the track and plowed into the tire barriers at nearly 100 miles an hour, that he might get back going. It's just so funny. You just got to laugh. I think that it's just really rich that they just seem to believe that a car that blew its brake rotor and flew into like Cicero basically through the tire barrier, that it was going to back out and, continue on. That's horse. It's just absolute BS. Like, I cannot believe that, one, NASCAR had the audacity to say such a thing after a 35-second hold. Like, that is a significant amount of time. Like, you could probably spin around 10 times and then shoot a basketball 3 or 4 different times after that while you're still dizzy, and you would still have enough time to see that Cody Ware was in the wall and a caution needed to be thrown. I just feel like we have so much technology at our disposal. As I mentioned, they have all the telemetry data that they needed available to them. They have all the in-car camera, information available to them. They have all of the camera angles from the broadcaster and their own international feed. This is just an excuse made by NASCAR. And again, I'm going to cut them a fraction of slack, because I think had this race gone to overtime, we'd be having a much different conversation, and probably a much worse conversation about how this race played out. Because rain was coming, thunderstorms were coming, and I knew this because I have friends in the city that told me that they were about a half hour north that they had gotten thunderstorms already. So I knew that we'd probably have to be ready for weather at some point, and thankfully we didn't have to worry about it. But if NASCAR's overtime rules weren't so stupid and rigid, then we wouldn't have this discussion. We could have just thrown the caution out at lap 74, and the race could have just ended at lap 75 under caution, like it ended up doing. But no, because we have overtime, and it's automatic, no matter what the circumstance. No matter what the circumstance is, we always have to go to overtime. That's kind of the problem here. Like, if you don't paint yourself into an ideological corner with your rule book, you don't have these kind of controversies pop up. So, yeah, I think it's a bunch of lame excuses by the people that run the sport, and it showed a very big lack of safety and, caution, ironically enough, for the driver that plowed into a tire barrier that was, blocking a concrete barrier behind it at almost 100 miles an hour and said, "I need help immediately." Like, it's almost as bad as when Carson Hocevar got his leg broken at Gateway in the Truck Series in 2022, and it took them a minute and a half to get him any sort of medical attention at a facility that's only 1.25 miles long. Like, NASCAR, unfortunately, has a history of doing things like this, and it's really, really infuriating. And they have no one but themselves to look at, because if you didn't have such rigid rules about going to overtime and leaning too far into the entertainment aspect of your sport, then you don't have problems like this. You could have just thrown the caution and the race could have just been over. But no, we have to lean into what the fans want so much that we are willing to endanger our competitors. And they did that twice today. The Josh Berry incident, too, was particularly infuriating because he sat there for a lap and a half, almost 2 laps, and the leaders, I was really worried at one point that they were just going to plow right into him. And thankfully that didn't happen. But the lack of a trigger finger for the yellow flag today, when they normally will see a car get loose on the backstretch and they'll throw a caution for it, it's just really inconsistent and a terrible look for the sport. And frankly, they should, kind of reconvene and have a hard look in the mirror, but they're not going to do that because this is just how they operate.
And I'm glad you brought up the Josh Berry one, because I was thinking, why did they wait so long? And then we hear, well, NASCAR allowed everyone to go by the pit straight. But it just sort of reminded me of when IndyCar was doing this a couple years ago. Oh, someone spun. We're not going to throw the caution because we know there's some cars in that so-called danger zone, and this is going to ruin the race. We'll give everyone an opportunity to pit. No, that's race manipulation. And we're talking about concrete walls. Those walls, they did sort of move because they're more Jersey barriers type walls where they're temporary. But still, those were hard hits for those cars. I just feel like, come on, throw the caution. I get it. Some races will be ruined by Josh Berry's caution, but at the end of the day, you can't just let him sit out there and just give everyone the opportunity. The IndyCar driver said, we don't want IndyCar quit doing that. And then with the overtime, I think this is something NASCAR really needs to consider. It's like, should we just make a change where it's like, okay, the overtime rule, certain circumstances, is not going to come in, and we're going to announce it or somehow make it clear, because if we got to not overtime, then you get the rain coming in, and then you're just going to get a sloppy finish, and then we're going to be talking about how sloppy this finish was, regardless of who won. If it was heavy thunder and lightning, or even, of course, one thunder, 30-minute clock starts, and then there's another, it starts over, then it just ends under red flag. Could have been really sloppy, and I think NASCAR needs to consider something about, okay, under what circumstances could we say, hey, there will be no overtime if this happens? Because at the end of the day, it just sets up so for a bigger mess rather than giving their fans what they really want, a green flag finish in a respectable race that doesn't look ridiculous. In this chat room, Denver, SVG, smart on him, hauling to the white flag. He probably heard on the radio the potential yellow flag situation on the last lap. Adam, SVG's success in Chicago, should buy a house there. He could definitely afford a house there, I think, especially overlooking Grant Park. More a studio, condo, I don't know, the market there in downtown. Give credit to Catherine Legg, 19th place finish. That's incredible. For Live Fast Racing, that's 78, 19th place finish. Definitely, I know next time we go on to Air for Women, more so to be talking about Catherine Legg's effort this race weekend at Chicago.
You might hear more about her later. You don't know. You never know.
Never know. And, of course, we got plenty more to talk about, so let's bring in Kobe Lambeth. Kobe, we talked a lot about one road course race. Let's talk about another one over and not far in Ohio, Mid-Ohio, IndyCar Series.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. And Alex Palou's path to the championship took another step forward despite one step backwards today, as a rare mistake ended up costing him the race win with 6 laps to go. Palou went off track and handed the lead to his teammate Scott Dixon, and the race was decided at that moment as Palou could not find a way to get by Dixon again. And Palou also had a 2-second lead at the time and was on track to win, but that rare silly mistake, just really cost him there. And with Scott Dixon's win, he extends his impressive streak of 21 straight seasons with the win, and he's now 8 wins away from tying the great AJ Foyt as the all-time winningest IndyCar driver. Joe, what's more surprising to you, Palou's mistake or Dixon earning a win and what was only his second podium of the year?
For me, I got to be honest, I was more surprised that Scott Dixon got to win more so than Alex Palou. I know we've seen Alex Palou race for quite a few years now in IndyCar series, and he doesn't make that many mistakes. With that said, though, he's still very young in his career. He still has a lot of potential, and he's getting to that level. He's in a situation he has not been in before with so many wins. He's almost to that point where I think he could just go on a little bit of like a cruise control, just hit your marks, do what you need to do. And I'm starting to wonder, maybe he just had that mental lapse and that allowed Scott Dixon to get around. Because Scott Dixon this year, how many times we talked about qualifying? Bad luck, no luck, starting towards the back, working its way towards the front, not getting wins. It just seems like this has not been a good season. So, considering the strategy they were on, I just thought, okay, he might get a podium. Then he found himself in second place. Hey, that's great. You're going to be second place, but it's going to be behind Alex Palou, on track to another win, and then Alex Palou makes that mistake. Scott Dixon goes there, gets the win. Looking at the rest of the season, Scott Dixon's going to have a hard time earning a win at any of the road courses, the ovals. Who knows what's going to happen if Penske shows up, or if this is the Penske that showed up today. He's going to show up in Iowa, and now everyone has a shot. I think he's not going to win another race, in my opinion. I think Scott Dixon, this is probably going to be his solo win of the year, and really just came at the expense of Alex Palou. Great for him, getting closer to AJ Foyt, 21 straight seasons of at least one win. Let's see if we can get to 22, but I feel like he's getting to the point where you're going to wonder how much longer he's going to be in the seat, and I think he still needs to step up his performance this year.
I think conversely to Joe, yeah, I am on mic. Okay, we're good. Anyway, I think conversely to Joe, I was a little bit more surprised by Alex Palou's error, personally, because he doesn't really make many of them. So not only that, it looked kind of weird. Like, looked like he was entering the corner like he had all day. Drives in there. All of a sudden, the car just goes straight. He didn't look like he had a lockup. Didn't look like anything out of the ordinary happened. It looked like the car just kind of went straight on him in that one corner. And it almost seemed like he wouldn't like give up on the corner. And that's why he ended up off the track. Like, I feel like if he had just locked it down and did whatever he could to keep it on the pavement, he might have still held the lead. But regardless, I still think it took an incredible effort to not completely bottle it and send it into the fence, especially on that corner. But you got to still tip your cap to Scott Dixon and that entire 9 team over at Chip Ganassi Racing. I'm sure it's got to be hard for a guy that's within spitting distance of AJ Foyt's all-time record, and a guy that has, won pretty much everything there is to win in the sport except at St. Petersburg. Let's not forget that you see your teammate, your young teammate, just continue to go out and throttle the competition in the same equipment every single week. And for Dixon, I feel like the competitor in him, it felt good to run for him what was essentially a flawless race. I feel like it is going to be a pretty big confidence boost for him in the 9 team going forward. But yeah, I feel like I was a little bit more surprised by Palou completely biffing the corner and then bottling the race entirely. But at the end of the day, Scott Dixon, just pure, unadulterated, perfect performance from him, which is pretty much what you should be able to expect from him. But in this hybrid era, this is his first victory, and we've just eclipsed a year of that unit being installed at this track last year. So it'll be interesting to see how the 9 team continues to perform after this. I don't feel like they exactly had a race winning pace kind of day, but when you execute well enough, you don't have to have race winning pace. As long as you come across the line first, it's really all that matters.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually have to side with Tanner on this one as well. Because Alex Palou, this is a guy who is almost flawless, and today we learned that he is in fact human because Alex Palou making a mistake is extremely rare. I was really surprised because it seemed like it wasn't necessarily cruise control for Alex Palou, especially since that restart. But if he just hit his marks, he was definitely gonna cruise on his way to a victory. Since passing, once it got spread out, was kind of difficult to make moves. So Alex Palou messed up there, and he was really hard on himself after the race. Say it hurts to lose that one because this was his race to lose, and he lost it. In an unfortunate way. But on the bright side of things, obviously didn't hurt him too badly in the championship. His points leads actually grew. I believe he's like 113 points ahead right now in the championship. So he's still looking good there. Can just really points race, for the next several races, and then he'll be holding up a championship at the end of the year once again. Yeah, so I was just really surprised that Palou made that mistake, and we'll see how he recovers from it. I think he'll bounce back really quickly, but I'm sure he's not really happy to see a couple of oval races coming up on the schedule since he's really a master of the road and street course races compared to the ovals. And Scott Dixon, got to tip your hat to him. Another great race from him, and 44 years old, 8 wins away from 10. AJ Foyt makes you wonder how much longer he's going to compete. I know we talk about this all the time on this show. Whenever Scott Dixon wins a race and mention AJ Foyt, if he can keep this form, well into his mid 40s, if he wants to continue to race, late 40s, early 50s, who knows how long. If he can keep this going for several more seasons, it would be really cool to see Scott Dixon either tie or eclipse AJ Foyt's record. I think that would be monumental for us to see this in the modern era because with AJ Foyt's record, I don't think a lot of us really believe anyone would even come close to matching it. But Scott Dixon, he's getting closer and closer. But I'm just afraid that, being 44 years old, we don't know when the drop is going to happen with Scott Dixon. But once it happens, it's obviously going to be really hard for him to try to tie or break Foyt's record. I think it would be cool to see it happen. But given, the dominance Alex Palou has on most race weekends and how competitive series usually is, I know Scott Dixon only became the third different race winner this year. So far, leading into this race, it was just Alex Palou all day and then a little bit of Kyle Kirkwood in between, and now Scott Dixon. So given all of that, I think it's going to be hard for Scott Dixon to try to get to AJ Foyt, but who knows? Maybe he'll go on a run and get a few more race wins into this season and race next season as well, maybe a few seasons after that, and continue to have this strong form. But really nice to be able to appreciate what Scott Dixon is doing right now. And now shifting gears, we talked about Chip Ganassi racing. Let's talk about the team's typical rival, Team Penske. And once again, it was another weekend to forget for Penske. Joseph Newgarden crashed out, lap 1, turn 1, as the car snapped around when he hit the brakes. Will Power had an engine failure. Both drivers only earned 5 points after finishing 26 and 27, respectively. Scott McLaughlin finished 23rd, 1 lap down, and only 7 points earned. All 3 Penske drivers also failed to advance out of Q1 in qualifying again. And Newgarden dropped to 19th in points, which is, really surprising because I don't think anyone would have expected at the start of this season that Joseph Newgarden would just barely be inside the top 20 in the points this late in the season. And a few days ago, Team Penske also announced some permanent replacements for those who were fired after the Indy 500 qualifying scandal. We'll have more on those people later this week on Grit Tonight. And we're going to start with you on this question, Tanner. Do you think some of the struggles we've seen from Team Penske, especially after the Indy 500, are related to the instability after the firings and not having people in permanent roles until just a few days ago?
I mean, I would have to think so. I feel like when you come into the season, you and your team have the entire year pretty much thought out to some extent. And to only get to race 5 of the year and your entire team is completely in disarray and everybody's hair is on fire. Like, think of that episode of SpongeBob where you're in his brain and you see all the 1,000 SpongeBobs in the office running around and there's fire everywhere. That's kind of what Team Penske's been pretty much all season since Indianapolis. So, yeah, I feel like the instability at the team for a team known for its inherent stability is really kind of ironic, especially considering the owner of that team owns the series. And yeah, it's been a real struggle for them. I feel like when you don't really have everybody in fixed roles and everybody is still kind of figuring out who is really in charge of things, it really makes things kind of murky. I feel like it's kind of odd that there has been more stability at AJ Foyt Racing, the, team that's supposed to be getting the runoff from Penske, as far as the technical alliance is concerned. I do find that it's really interesting that they have had way more stability and way more success this year with their drivers than Penske has had with theirs. And I would say it's a bit concerning, but at a certain point, I mean, like, the championship was over once Palou won Barber, I feel like. So with all that in mind, you look back at the season, and yeah, Bob Pockrass's question at St. Pete seemed kind of silly to begin with, where he asked Joseph Newgarden how he was going to be able to keep up with Alex Palou, and the answer to that question should have been that no one was going to be able to keep up with Alex Palou. So at the end of the day, I feel like Penske Perfect has not been the motto for that team this year, and I feel like they need to spend the rest of 2025 trying to build themselves up to perfection again to start 2026. Obviously, you'd like to get a win or two, maybe even 3, 1 for each car for the rest of the year, but the calendar's kind of running out of dates for them to do that. So I definitely think a big look in the mirror and a big reevaluation needs to take place before they hit this really big stretch of ovals here towards the end of the year. If not, we could somehow, inexplicably, go through an entire season without a Team Penske victory in a series owned by Roger Penske. Imagine saying that coming into the year with Joseph Newgarden, coming into the year with aspirations of winning a third straight unprecedented Indy 500.
The fact that Roger Penske owns the series, then of course, Team Penske, and then the mess at the Indianapolis 500, I think we all anticipated, okay, there's going to be changes, and we did. And we got to remember, a lot of us were convinced that at the Indy 500, when we found out, okay, there were some firings, but that's it. Going into the Indianapolis 500, I felt very confident Team Penske was going to go out there and be very competitive. And we saw Joseph Newgarden was competitive until a mechanical issue. Because similar to what we see in other forms of motorsports, you may have a race where your crew chief is suspended 1 race or 2 races. But then the team knows how to handle the situation with 1 race without that person. And I think we saw that at the Indianapolis 500. I think we saw that even at Gateway too, where the teams, they were still running. But I feel especially the last 2 races, when you're talking about Road America and here, that's where I think we're starting to see, okay, now we're starting to feel the effects of life without Tim Cindric, of life since the firings. And that's why I think it's starting to become a little bit of a concern, because in qualifying, nothing to show. Joseph Newgarden, just bad luck in that start, going out, first lap, just struggling this year. My almost concern is, especially the way he's been racing lately, St. Petersburg, it looked like, okay, this is going to be the Joseph Newgarden we're anticipating to be a championship contender. Hasn't happened. Is he going to be one of those drivers that's just going to be, okay, it's an oval, he's going to be really good? The road courses, he's maybe not exactly a factor. I just think that's almost seems to be the route he's going. And when you look at the last time he won the road course, my goodness, I think we're looking back to Mid-Ohio, and I don't exactly remember the year. It was 2021. No, he won Long Beach 2022, I recall. So, but yeah, I mean, it's for a person that's known for the ovals, I feel like, where is he going lately? Just ovals and then the road courses, nothing lately. Will Power, the rumors of him being replaced, that's still there. And then Scott McLaughlin, this is the driver I feel is the biggest surprise, because we saw last year how good he was. And I really thought he was going to be probably the lead Penske driver. Nothing to show today. A lap down, just struggling. I think they are starting to feel the effects of the firings. The fact that they got some permanent leadership there, that's great. Now they can start rebuilding up. Just a matter of how long it's going to take them, because it's not going to be an easy task. I mean, replacing a person like Tim Cindric, that's some big shoes you got to fill. The pressure of Team Penske essentially is almost like the pressure of being manager of the Yankees in Major League Baseball. You got a lot of pressure on your hands. You got some top caliber drivers with New Garden, Scott McLaughlin, Will Power. I think they're gonna be a lot of pressure to turn things around because we've seen Penske go through a slump like this in the kart era, and it took some big changes to get them out of that slump. Particularly, Allison Jr. was no longer in the seat. They switched to Honda, Firestone tires. It took drastic changes, and Tim Cindric was part of that. Let's see what happens with Penske without Tim Cindric now.
Yeah, Joe, and it's going to be interesting to see how Team Penske is going to navigate the remainder of this IndyCar season. And I think the best thing they can do is just, with all these people in permanent roles now, everyone knows what they're supposed to do. Now they just need to try to build chemistry and get some momentum heading into 2026, because this year, it's been a year to forget for Team Penske. And honestly, I never expected that we would see them in this position in the year 2025. And I think I can't remember who said it on social media, but during the IndyCar race, when I was scrolling through Twitter, I saw someone say, yes, Roger Penske bought the series, but Chip Ganassi owns it right now because of all of the race wins that he has this season. And honestly, at this point of the season, we still got a handful of oval races on the back end. So I still think it's possible we see Team Penske win a race this year, but I would honestly be still surprised if Team Penske does not win a single IndyCar race this year among their three drivers. And we know Will Power hasn't forgotten how to drive. Scott McLaughlin hasn't forgotten either. I don't even think Joseph Newgarden has obviously forgotten how to drive either. I think with Joseph's situation, just been a nightmarish season with so many things going wrong. And Scott McLaughlin, I think if they get some things figured out, his performance would tick up. And Will Power, he's actually the only Team Penske driver in the top 10 right now in points, and he's the one who doesn't have a contract for next year. So Will Power still leading the ship there at Penske, and still waiting to see how his contract situation goes. But yeah, I think they need to figure out a lot of things. So now we don't have like replacements every week. People who are in interim roles. Now we have people in the places, and now you just need to let them go to work and see if they can get Team Penske back to being the gold standard of the NTT IndyCar Series. Because this year, as you said, they have not been Penske perfect. All is actually been complete opposite of that. Just been a complete disaster across the board for the organization. And this next race weekend, they're going to be going to Iowa Speedway, and on this program in the past, we've called Joseph Newgarden the king of Iowa Speedway. I even suggested that maybe they should rename it Joseph Newgarden Speedway because of how good he is. I think that Joseph Newgarden should be a strong contender to win at least one of the next two races at Iowa. I'll be mildly surprised if he's not in contention, because I have a feeling if it wasn't for what happened at Gateway, he probably would have won Gateway. So I think it's just a matter, of putting races together and not having bad luck go your way, because on Newgarden's case, it's just been, nothing has gone right for him this year. And like you were saying, Joe, I thought Newgarden was going to have a really strong season after opening up the year with that podium in St. Pete, and had a whole lot of things go wrong. Some of it not his fault, and some of it unfortunately was. Like, you had the seatbelt issue at Long Beach, then you had the fuel pump issue in the Indy 500, and then unfortunate situation at Gateway with Louis Foster, then the crash at Road America, and then the crash earlier today at Mid-Ohio. I'm sure Joseph Newgarden just wants to get through the rest of this season and completely forget about it and reset in 2026, because 19th place in points is not representative of the race car driver that he is. I still believe he is a top 10 driver in the series. It's just not happening this year. And it looks like he's going to be on pace for his worst season in IndyCar yet. So, but there's still time for him to, continue to tick up the board. But as far as championship wise, that's pretty much gone right now. It just needs to focus on salvaging the year, try to roll out some good results, and head into 2026 on a positive note. And to wrap up our IndyCar section, where, as Tanner said, we are now 1 year into the IndyCar hybrid era as the new engine debuted at Mid-Ohio last year. And in today's race, we had 8 lead changes with 2 cautions. And last year, there were 4 lead changes and 1 caution. So we kind of doubled everything this time around. And Joe, how would you compare this race to last year's race at Mid-Ohio?
I think comparing it to last year's race, overall, I felt this was something where it was an improvement from last year when it comes to the racing we saw. But at the same time, we're in a year where Alex Palou is just on that other level. A little bit the theme of the year, especially the first half before we got to the Indianapolis 500, was the lack of cautions. Okay, we had a couple cautions, but I mean, overall, this just seemed like another race when it comes to the 2025 IndyCar season that we will be saying it was a bit of an average race. I'm really curious what people would say had Alex Palou gone out there, won the race by over 2 seconds on his teammate. We saw the strategy aspect. We saw plenty of racing. I mean, we saw contact, hard battles. It's just one of those deals where I feel like it's not standout racing. It's not something where you're telling folks you can't miss this race. The competition level is just so different this year with alcohol on such another level. Really, it's just everyone battling for second place, third place, but we know the struggles of passing. But it has improved, but it's just still better than last year. But I feel like considering the product, nothing out of the ordinary.
So I opened up the race report for each of the last 3 years, including today. So the last Mid-Ohio race with an internal combustion engine only, the very first race with the hybrid last year, and now that we've had a year of hybrid, today's race. So 2023 had 120 position passes. They only had 4 caution laps the entire race. So that tells me there wasn't a whole lot of yellow that day, but there was still a pretty good amount of variance throughout the field. As for last year's race, only had 2 caution laps, which tells me there was only 1 caution. Only 78 position passes, so 42 less than the year before. Not a great day. But today, we had 8 caution laps, which is, again, significantly more than either of the last 2 years. So technically there was less green flag time for guys to be making passes. And yet we had 110 position passes today. That's incredible. Like, I don't know, after last year's race, I really thought we were in for a real snooze fest today, and somehow a pretty decent race broke out. I know that, like, these kind of nerdy stats don't really, like, blow people's minds away by any stretch, but for me, I think that position passes in particular display exactly how much variance and how competitive the field was. And to see today a lot of drivers be able to make moves throughout the field, actually progress, catch a car, be able to actually make a pass, it was encouraging. I think that having the entire month of May to kind of fiddle around with the hybrid units certainly helped practically every team on the grid start to, get a feel for it. Even though they had a whole off season to take a look at the thing and try to hammer out some stuff there, you don't really know until you really hit the track and, get hard data from it, exactly how those changes that you tried to set forth in the off season will translate onto the racetrack. So I felt that having the whole month of May has probably helped the entire grid, more specifically the Chevy teams, who, again, still haven't won this year. I cannot stress that enough. The Chevy teams have not won this year. So I think that the gap to Palou, Ganassi, and Andretti, the Hondas writ large, is starting to close a little bit more and more each week. I mean, even though Palou had what looked to be about a 5 to 6 second lead over Scott Dixon before he obviously drove himself off the track, when the last 5 laps of the race started to tick by and Palou was closing in on Scott Dixon, there was a third car in the background, and it was Christian Lundgaard in a Chevy for McLaren. So I feel like today's race definitely gives me a little bit more confidence going forward that the teams are starting to kind of figure this hybrid thing out. But I still feel like we're probably a year away maybe a little less from seeing the racing that we were, more accustomed to coming into the 2024 season, where we had practically every race be competitive up until we added the hybrid unit, and then Alex Palou kind of just took over after that. So today, I think, is proof that a year past where we started this whole project, I'd say it's starting to inch its way towards being a success, but still think the jury's out.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've definitely made progress quite a bit in a year's time, because as I would mention on the last show about IndyCar, we had 3 incredibly good races in a row after the Indy 500. Detroit, which has been chaos, that was great, and then Gateway, that was really awesome. Seeing all the overtaking and all of that, and then Road America, another fun race, and then the battle at the end today between Palou and Dixon, really exciting. We're seeing a lot of encouraging things with this hybrid engine just a year, and I have to agree with Tanner. I think once we get another year of development into this, I think it'll continue to be better, and we'll get closer to what we saw before in the pre-hybrid era. And I think we've seen some very encouraging signs here, and I hope the progress continues, because we're stuck with this current configuration for the next 2 years at the very least. In 2026 and 2027, this is going to be the package that we're going to have. So they need to continue to improve it. So we'll have two more seasons of incredible racing before IndyCar moves to the new car in 2028. So I think today's race definitely shows how much progress they made in a year's time, and I look for IndyCar to continue making progress and moving forward and improving on that project. Get back to being the IndyCar we all know and love when you wake up on race morning, and you may have an idea of who may win the race, but once the race starts, it's just anyone's game of who could potentially win there. And I believe we're done with IndyCar for tonight. And with that said, Tanner, I'll let you take it away with Formula One.
Yes, heading across the pond to Silverstone, a wild British GP broke out today. We saw multiple virtual safety car periods, changing weather conditions, and one true safety car, which ended up being the defining moment of the Grand Prix for Oscar Piastri for all the wrong reasons. The McLaren driver had a 10-second lead before the safety car came out, but once the safety car period was over and the green flag was about to come out, Piastri hit the brakes. This caught Max Verstappen, who was riding in second, by surprise and bunched the field up. Not only that, the troubles didn't stop there for Verstappen, as he went spinning into the next corner after Piastri stomped on the gas, and the FIA responded in kind by giving Piastri a 10-second time penalty, which ultimately was his undoing in this Grand Prix, erasing his lead in the pits and handing the lead to eventual winner Lando Norris. So, Kobe, starting with you, did the stewards make the right or the wrong decision on the Piastri penalty?
I honestly don't know if they made the right or wrong decision with the penalty, but I can say I think 10-second time penalty, is a little too harsh in this situation. I don't think, Oscar, intentionally, tried to brake check, the field from behind, but I just saw it, as just an unfortunate situation that happened. It ended up costing Oscar Piastri the British Grand Prix, because it really seemed like that once he got around Max, that this was going to be his race, and then unfortunately Max went spin and ruined his race, and then Oscar had his race ruined right there.
Yeah, I think when it came to Oscar Piastri and the race, I mean, he said it in the post-race interviews, like, I just tapped the brakes and they gave me a penalty. And I'm just thinking, well, I get where you are. You want to give the safety car the space. I just felt like one of the big keys, and they were talking about this during the race coverage, is the stewards were taking into account everything that happened after that. The fact that Verstappen got around the leader, didn't have to give up the position. We saw drastically, I thought we were going to see some cars, especially further back, start to pile in, maybe contact between 2 or 3. But then you have Verstappen going for that spin. I think this also influence, and that's why I'm more on the camp that I just think this wasn't the right call. Granted, we had wet conditions and everything, I know F1 TV, the commentator was saying, well, this is to send a little bit of a signal that because of the wet conditions, everything, they don't want anything like this to occur. I just still not convinced that it was the right decision at all. I just think it was just really unfortunate. A 15-second lead to lose it that way and then to lose a race that way. That has to be harsh.
Indeed, it does. Yeah, as far as the penalty is concerned, I feel like 10 seconds is a bit robust for the infraction involved. But at the end of the day, this is just the kind of things you have to deal with at the top level of motorsports. The officiating body is going to crack down on certain antics, and whether the driver viewed it as an antic or not really just doesn't matter. So moving on, in the cooldown room after the race, Piastri did not look at or congratulate teammate Lando Norris on a home country victory, I should say. However, Piastri did ask during the race to swap the positions of the two cars since his McLaren team did not agree with the penalty. So, Joe, swinging it back on over to you, did this catch you by surprise, Piastri's behavior after the race? And is this a sign of trouble to come for the McLaren duo?
It could be a sign of trouble if Lando Norris continues to perform better and better. He needs to get to that stage. I don't think he is really at the same level as Oscar Piastri. I mean, he was behind all day, second place all day. I could understand Oscar Piastri frustrated after the penalty, after the pit stop. You're in second place. We should switch positions. Well, 100% disagree with Oscar Piastri in that. Lando Norris didn't do any mistakes. It was your own mistake with the FIA. That's the way it goes. That's a penalty. When it comes to Piastri's behavior after the race in the cooldown room, not congratulating his teammate, not wanting to really acknowledge or look at him, I'm a little torn. Is that something where, okay, just the way he felt he was robbed and everything, maybe he's going to cool down and then eventually reach out to Lando and say, congratulations on that race win and move on? That's great. But the big thing is this, though. You have your two drivers fighting for a championship. Oscar Piastri feels like he's the number one driver. He has the championship lead. He should get the preferential treatment. At the end of the day, though, you make a mistake, you cannot just say, hey, I should get the lead again. No, it doesn't matter that you were both so far ahead of this kick Saubert. You made that mistake on track. Lando had nothing to do with it. Lando got around you. You're going to finish second place. So that's the key, I think, is if Lando keeps performing and putting a little bit more pressure on Oscar Piastri, it could get to that point where those two will not get along. It's just a matter of what Lando could do behind the car because he still needs to step it up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Joe. While Lando Norris has certainly stepped it up lately, I have to give him credit to that in these last two Grand Prix races. But when you really look at the full picture of the season, Oscar Piastri has been the one who's been more consistent than Lando throughout the season. And so Lando is playing catch up right now. And it was certainly some interesting post-race antics there in the cool-down room. And, you know, Piastri rightfully congratulated Nico Hulkenberg for getting his podium, which we'll talk about in just a little while. And then Lando comes in the room and he basically, you know, just continues to look in one direction, not even, you know, not even saying like, congrats, man, like bumping fists, shaking hands, none of that. I think you can't really blame Oscar for feeling, you know, that type of way, frustrated, you know, the frustration of feeling robbed. Because, as you know, we just debated whether the stewards made the right or wrong call. I guess you can say that he was robbed of the race victory today because it looked like Oscar was going to win that race if it wasn't for the penalty. So super unfortunate. I thought it was entirely laughable that he came over the radio and said, you know, since we both agreed that that I didn't deserve the penalty here, can we just swap us back and have us race it out? Basically, yeah, I'm with you, Joe. Like, no, that's not how it works. You, the driver, and the team may feel very upset by the penalty, but at the end of the day, you know, the penalty is the penalty, and if you don't serve your penalty, obviously they're going to black flag you and stop scoring you. So Piastri served his penalty and went on about that. But I think it would have been extremely ridiculous if McLaren had, give in to his demands and say, Lando, let Oscar go back by and we're going to have you race it out. Like, that just would have been completely nonsensical if they would have allowed that to happen. But today it seemed like, Oscar, got super frustrated for the very first time, because we've given him a lot of credit for being cool, calm, and collective. And today was really the first time which we saw the frustration boil over for him. And if Lando continues to, inch closer to him, I wonder what's going to happen between the two. I don't know if this is a sign of trouble to come, but certainly going to make for some interesting discussions at the McLaren camp moving forward.
No kidding. Yeah, I feel like Piastri's lack of congratulations to Lando, I can kind of understand it. I definitely feel like he kind of got his win taken away from him, especially when you consider prior to that safety car, he had a 10-second advantage, and then he was given a 10-second penalty right afterwards. So not only was your 10-second lead erased, you have to give up an additional 10 seconds to the competition in pit road later on. That said, I feel like at the same time, much like Connor Zilic in yesterday's Xfinity Series race, I feel like this kind of squabble between he, Norris, and the team is only going to make Oscar Piastri stronger going forward. And I'm sure that, considering his way of lobbying for the go-ahead to get past Lando after the team, and he agreed that the penalty was unfair, I feel like going forward, Oscar will probably remember how he was treated in this moment and use it against them another times. So we'll all have to stay tuned for that. But while McLaren has a lot going on, the Steak Kick Sauber team, they have a lot of celebrating. Nico Hulkenberg, for the first time in his career, I believe on the broadcast they said his 239th Grand Prix start, finished third on the podium for the first time in his career. He started 19th, second to last, and for the fourth consecutive race, another points finish. A bit of luck with the timing of the virtual safety car and safety car periods in general, but Kobe, I'm going to start with you. Nico doesn't have many years left in him. Does this buy him more seat time with Audi?
Oh, well, when he signed his contract with the team, it was going to obviously run over into his Audi F1 tenure that begins next year. And I think it really shows you, that if you give Nico Hulkenberg the right car in the right situation, he can go out there and perform. I think today was a wonderful day for Nico Hulkenberg and for the Sauber team to be able to get a podium like this. And there have been times in the past where Nico Hulkenberg's been close to getting the podium, and they were like, oh man, today is not the day after all. And when he was in position to get that podium today, I was thinking, like in the past, something's going to go wrong, right? Because Nico Hulkenberg, he is the definition of a true F1 journeyman who's driven for multiple teams throughout his career. He spent time out of the sport and come back. It seemed like that Nico Hulkenberg is that one F1 driver who just will not go away. But he's certainly been serviceable at the teams that he's been a part of. And today, showing his showing what he can do as a veteran, coming from the very back of the grid all the way up to third. Just a remarkable drive by Hulkenberg. He has a lot to be proud of. And after being in F1 this long, 239 Grand Prix racing to get your first podium now, that's just a massive career accomplishment. And just seeing the team celebrate after the fact, that was really heartwarming to see. I know a lot of people would be excited to see a British driver winning the British Grand Prix, but I would argue that some of the cheers were louder for Nico Hulkenberg than it was for Lando Norris, the British driver who won the British Grand Prix. There was just a lot of people chanting Nico, and just so happy for him, because if you're not in the right situation, in the right car at the right time, you're not going to be able to achieve as much success in Formula One. And for Nico Hulkenberg to stick around for as long as he has and to finally get that podium, Lando Norris wasn't just the only winner today at Silver, so Nico Hulkenberg was also a winner as well. I'm sure this felt like a Grand Prix win for him. And if you've seen social media, I encourage you to see the video of his young daughter, so excited to see her dad standing on the podium for the very first time in F1. Just a heartwarming moment right there. Just really happy that Nico Hulkenberg got that podium. It's definitely a feel-good story.
A definitely feel-good story, and especially in a series like Formula One, where we know there's only between 20, 22 passengers, 24, even 26 seats on the grid. And it's a very intense atmosphere where you have to go out there, not only just try to go out there and win, you sometimes going to have a teammate, top caliber equipment, going out there to try to get a win. I feel so often we hear about drivers that one season they're done. Some drivers just cannot find the success, go over to other series. And I kept thinking for the longest time Nico Hulkenberg was going to be one of those drivers that we'll talk about, like so many stars, so many opportunities, but just cannot get it. There's no way I could predict safely. I bet nobody had said, "Oh, Nico Hulkenberg will finally get his podium in 2025." We know the Kick Sauber team is not where they want to be at all. But Nico Hulkenberg, give him credit. 4 consecutive point finishes. On the air Saturday, me and Nicole Fry, we were talking about could Nico make another consecutive point finish starting from 19th spot? The answer was pretty much no. We did not see that occurring. We talked about how we know safety cars could make this race chaotic. We know how safety cars could change the impact. And that team, Nico Hulkenberg, they played that really well to get up to third place. While other teams were having issues with strategy, some of them making the wrong calls, like Russell and Leclerc very early on switching to the slicks, that ruined their race. We saw drivers like Alex Albon stayed out on those original intermediate tires too long, fell towards the back. Nico Hulkenberg and that Stake Sauber team, they worked magic today to stay up there, get to third place, get around Lance Stroll to get to the third place, and then just hold off Lewis Hamilton. The pit stops worked out well for them. Everything came together. What a drive. Feel good story. I think this is probably going to be the feel good story potentially of the year unless we see something even more crazy. And just like you said, Cody, the cheers, they seem louder for Nico Hulkenberg because so many people have followed his career. I believe it was in Germany where he was running in the top 3, crashed out, and we thought, oh, he just lost out his podium. And I kept thinking, if that's the closest he'll get to the podium, that would just almost haunt him. Well, now he got that podium finish. Let's see what happens. I think this does buy him some time in Audi, but overall, it just buys him a little bit more time in the F1 seat in general.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So, after a very eventful race weekend, a very action-packed 52 laps around Silverstone. Actually, first, I guess we're going to go to the comment here from Ben. Who would have thought something would happen to get people rooting against a Lewis Hamilton podium at Silverstone? Incredible story for Hulk. I couldn't agree more. Denver popped in as well, saying, never treat an Aussie like dirt. It's like a boomerang with we Aussie. We know how to use its anger we do know how to use our anger very well. I bet that's true. Anyhow, with that action-packed Silverstone race in the books, you obviously have the Piastri penalty, the Verstappen spin, the Lando Norris hometown victory, and the Hulkenberg podium. Joe, what will you remember about the 2025 British Grand Prix?
Easily, it's going to be the Hulkenberg podium. I mean, that's going to be the first thing that stands out. But I would also say what's going to stand out is, and is really going to be, I think, magnify as we go later in the season, is was this the race weekend for Max Verstappen to say, okay, Toto, let's talk some more, because this weekend was just disastrous for the Red Bull team. They came in with a low downforce package to try to get the pole. They did. They just had nothing, and he was just struggling on a new level. I've never seen Max Verstappen struggle in wet conditions as badly as he did. Yuki Tsunoda just out there doing his little own thing, not helping him out. I just got a sense that this could be seen as like potentially the race that really set the wheels in motion for Max Verstappen to potentially look into Mercedes for 2026.
Yeah, speaking of Yuki, let's be honest, Joe. He's not really out there racing; he's just logging laps because there's nothing that driver in that second Red Bull car can do. And as we get closer to the summer break, I wonder if we're going to see another driver swap at Red Bull. I wonder if they're going to give Isaac Hadjar a shot in the car. Maybe they go back to Liam Lawson, see what Liam can do. But it's just been a complete disaster within that team. And I know there were been a lot of rumors over the weekend about Max Verstappen and Mercedes. Obviously, we touched on it on Grid tonight. We saw the iconic photo, Max sitting down, and then you have all these reporters in his face, basically asking him the same question over and over and over again about his future. But seeing what happened today, he did a great job getting the pole, but just did not have the pace, to maintain it right there from the McLaren. Then the spin, unfortunately, not able to do anything. Even Max said on the radio once again, he said the car is undrivable, and still was able to salvage a good result from this race by his standards. And all in all, thought the British Grand Prix was pretty good, all things considered. British Grand Prix is one of my favorite races to watch every year because it seems like something is always going to happen at Silverstone, for better or worse. And definitely got to congratulate Lando Norris for a great victory. Although that Oscar Piastri would have won if it wasn't for the penalty, but still can't take it away from Lando. It's always special when you get to win your home Grand Prix because we've seen Lewis Hamilton obviously do it in the past, and now Lando Norris is standing on the top step of the podium at home, and then got to share a special moment with his mother there after he got out of the car. And you definitely want to do it in front of families, friends. And there's nothing like being at home, right?
Agreed. And yeah, I think if I have a personal takeaway from this weekend, it'll probably be more so in retrospect. I want to see how Oscar Piastri responds to what happened this weekend. I feel like things like this could make or break a season where a competitor loses a race for something that kind of felt out of their control. And this is really the first time with Piastri that we've seen that happen with him. And he seemed pretty miffed about it. So I am really interested to see going forward how he's going to respond to that and, continue to try to hold on to that championship lead with Lando Norris now starting to creep his way back into the championship battle. But with all that said, Kobe, I'm going to throw it over to you to talk about our updated grid ranking.
Yeah, and despite throwing the race win away, Alex Palou is still the leader of the grid ranking because, runner-up spot obviously not going to hurt you too badly in our ranking. Lando Norris now at 4 wins, climbs closer to his teammate Oscar Piastri. Kyle Kirkwood fell out of the top 10, and Octonic from World Rally Championship is in. Denny Hamlin also got around Kyle Larson. Looking at the rest of the grid ranking, Alex Palou has 10 races down and 7 to go. He's almost at the point where he can eliminate all Formula E drivers from the grid ranking. World Championship, they have 4 races remaining. The next one is in Berlin, a doubleheader next week, and alongside Formula E next racing weekend. We also have an IndyCar doubleheader at Iowa, MotoGP in Germany, 3 supercars racing on the streets of Townsville, and Sonoma hosting NASCAR with SVG going for 2 in a row, and also another Cup Series win, his 3rd of the season. And with that said, I believe it's time for our Grid One Shining Moment.
Yes, indeed, the grid one shining moment where we take one of the performances from the weekend and we shine a light on it. So this week we are going to start with Kobe. What was your grid one shining moment?
I think I know one obvious one we just talked about in F1, so I'm not going to steal that from either you. I'm just going to focus on the team and give my shining moment to the Sauber team because they've been through so much since their last podium in F1. The last time they scored a podium in Formula One, it was the 2012 Japanese Grand Prix with Japanese driver Kamui Kobayashi, who is now racing in the World Endurance Championship for Toyota Gazoo Racing. And also to put into perspective how long that's been for all you IndyCar fans, that the last time Sauber was on the podium, it was the first year of the DW12 chassis, and we've had that car forever, just to put into perspective of how long it's been. And this team been through a lot of struggles financially, a lot of changes within the leadership, but some way, somehow, Sauber is still kicking strong. I know that they went through the partnership there with Alfa Romeo, which lasted for a little while, and then the transition to being the state F1 team, Kick Sauber, and all of that. Been through a lot of different name changes over the years, but they're still in F1 because they've been in F1 for many, many years now, and to get back on the podium for the first time since 2012, that's just a remarkable accomplishment and shows the perseverance that this team has had over the years. And it makes you wonder, what can they do once this team becomes the Audi F1 team in 2026 to kick off a new brand era of Formula Ones, and Audi has this full factory F1 effort. And given the car that they have this year, a car that we honestly thought was going to be completely terrible considering how awful they were in 2024, and to see Hulkenberg and then Gabriel Bortoleto, starting to come into his own a little bit in F1. I think it's just a sign of things to come for this team, that they can continue to improve, get better, and see Hulkenberg in the points again in future Grand Prix races. Thought today was just a huge win for that entire organization. It has to feel like a win for the whole team there. So gotta tip your hat to Sauber.
When it comes to my shining moment, I think I have to go. You went with Sauber. I have to go with the driver, and I think it's the shining moment of the race weekend, Nico Hulkenberg. What a career this driver has had when it comes to F1. At one point, he was out of a ride, then he became a super substitute. Then he got another opportunity to come back again. And it just seems like he always seems to be the driver that a lot of folks look to when it comes to, okay, he has the ability to bring some knowledge, information, data to the car to help it get better and better and better. We've seen some memes going around the internet of how he has outscored the second Red Bull driver for quite a few races by now when you combine Perez, Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda. Overall, I mean, over 20 points scored by him this year. And then to get this third place finish, which puts him finally on the podium for that Stake Sauber team. That is huge points for that team in the midfield battle now. No longer last place. And I think this is just really shows the talent he has behind the wheel when it comes to Formula One. If he has a great ride, he could do great things. Time is not exactly on his side, but if he keeps doing this, just bringing more improvements to Sauber, when Audi comes around, if they have a good car, they could do something I think special in 2026. Nico Hulkenberg, my shining moment.
I am going to kick it back over to the NASCAR world, where Catherine Legg in the Live Fast Racing entry got a top 20 finish. Now, there's a little bit more to that story with Catherine Legg than that. Yesterday in qualifying and practice, she had a couple of run-ins with some of the concrete barriers, because that Chicago street course is no joke. I mean, we saw multiple champions, multiple race winners of the NASCAR Cup Series struggle on it today in dry conditions and struggle on it mightily in wet conditions the past 2 years. So this is a tough racetrack for literally anybody from any discipline, unless your name is Shane Van Gisbergen. But Catherine Legg, because she was in an unchartered entry, an open car in the NASCAR Cup Series, she had to actually contend to make this race among the likes of defending Supercars champion Will Brown, NASCAR regular Josh Bilicki, and current Truck Series superstar Corey Heim, who is in a 2311 development entry. And after Heim slid into the wall during his qualifying run and bent or broke a toe link in his car, he was unable to match Legg's time, and Catherine Legg and her ELF-sponsored number 78 Chevrolet made the race. And the race was no easy jaunt for her either. She did slide into the turn one barriers at some point during the second or third stage, and honestly, I thought for a moment that she might be out of the race, but luckily the way she hit the tires in turn one, she kind of just rebounded off of them and didn't really sustain any lingering damage. And thanks to a pretty wild last 20 laps or so, she was able to climb her way back into the top 20 and get a 19th place finish. And honestly, for a team like that at Live Fast Racing, who isn't really accustomed to running well really anywhere, this was actually the first top 20 by the number 78 car at any track, at any road course, I should say, since Martin Truex Jr. piloted that number with Furniture Row Racing back in 2018. So all that to say, Catherine Legg, she put on an incredible performance in that beautiful ELF-sponsored livery, and it was great to see her show some competitive pace after she has endured a number of unsolicited and unnecessary marks against her character since her ill-fated Phoenix debut back in March in the Cup Series. So shout out to Live Fast and Catherine Legg. It was a great performance and a great team effort by them this weekend.
Great shining moments across the board, and of course, a lot of racing still to be talked about. Tomorrow, Grid Encore, Ben and Brandon will be on the air to recap NASCAR Xfinity Series. Indy next, which had a big crash as well too, plus much more. Ben and Brandon usually having a hot take, so be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network so you don't miss them. Wednesday Grid tonight, Kobe will be on the air with Josh and Matt for the latest Grid Endurance Performance Index and the latest news from around the motorsport world. Then we'll do this all over again next race weekend. Busy weekend racing with Formula E, IndyCar, MotoGP, Supercars, and the NASCAR Cup Series. We'll be on the air next weekend. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in to today's program. A little bit of a longer show, but a lot to talk about, especially with Chicago, the F1 race, and the IndyCar race. And once again, thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next time. For Tanner and Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you again.